future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Pierre Lindh.
No, I'm joking. No knock joke today. Yeah. There's that legendary smile of James King, though. How's it going?
It's very good. I don't think you're ever going to top yesterday's knock. So
no, I think that was the height of my podcast career. Actually, it's down
quit
from
now.
here, I think. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I mean, we're back here today, James. I mean, we recorded our part 1 yesterday, and we ended up in a situation where we both had a hard stop, that we both had to jump into various meetings here. And afterwards we spoke and we said, there is a lot more to discuss than we managed to do yesterday. We had a bit of a fluffy conversation of the future of the industry, which is always interesting to talk about, but we completely left out another subject that we had been wanting to talk about, which is kind of the approach to marketing 2020 versus approach to marketing 2021, and how you see that process and how you go about that. So let's just jump straight into it. There's no need for introductions or anything today. We all know who you are and what you do, obviously. So let's get going, James. I mean, 2020 obviously presented itself with this massive change that came very sudden. And now when we're going to 2021, we're still in very uncertain territory, and we don't know exactly how the pandemic will pan out. Can you talk a little bit about you guys' approach to marketing in 2020, and how do you see 2021 playing out?
Yeah, and I think we can probably both add to that 2022 as well, right?
Yeah.
For the foreseeable of 2021, it seems quite uncertain. So I think 2022 would be, again, the next, I suppose, normalized year since 19. But like you say, 2020, and we probably touched on it in the podcast, I guess, towards the end of last year, it was quite turmoil. Like from the outset, as with, I think, probably most across the industry, both from supplier operator side, we had planned a lot of our activity in terms of lead gen or reaching new customer to be done through event and event presence, either with having a stand at events or some kind of sponsorship as a sort of minimal sort of exposure to at least just have people there. And it got off to a good start, and the intended start with ICE, which was a brilliant show. I think, sort of personally speaking, one of the best that sort of we've had in terms of touch points with potential opportunities. And shortly following that, the world went into lockdown. So I had to pivot kind of the entire approach that we then were going to take to continue the sort of momentum that started at ICE and that we had planned to be at sort of all other events through the year, to not having that, and sort of working out how we could, I suppose, mitigate that. So my approach was to sort of pivot towards a more, I guess, digital dial out to an extent. We were lucky, I think, that there were some early movers from the event and media side that took as best they could their offering into online, into a digital sort of event stage or scenario. So that offered some kind of opportunity to mitigate a little bit. But then the other part was, like, as a commercial team, as a sales team, was having to, what you might say, kind of go a bit old school in terms of dial out and sort of go through lists of people on, LinkedIn, go back into the old directories that I think to some extent probably a lot of the industry directories hadn't been looked at for quite a while. But digging those out of the drawers and going back into it, and as said, kind of just being very proactive through any means possible to kind of reach out to the market, to potential buyers. And that's an approach that sort of we pivoted to and stuck with through 2020. And I think kind of the results showed as things progressed through H1 and then obviously through H2 that it worked for us. And I think as best we could, we maintained a level of exposure that we had planned to have originally, just through slightly different means.
Exactly. So it must have been a lot of cold calls and cold messaging. Kind of, you're saying back to basics. Back to basics in the age of social media, I guess, where rather than having a catalog of phone numbers to call, it would be kind of people to message on LinkedIn. I would assume as well would be like one of those channels that you guys would leverage as well.
Yeah, I mean, probably from a point of view of active sales outreach, it was the most important channel. Probably still is, in terms of, I guess, kind of search it, going in blind almost. It's a great tool. Like, there's an element that you can tailor your search, so you can kind of start narrowing down to geographies that are of interest, sort of verticals, job type, if you know the type of person that, or the job type that usually kind of interacts or buys with us. So it's not entirely blind as to kind of just randomly type in casino and see how it goes.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think as well, it was quite interesting. The mentality of people changed, that perhaps, I think we were all guilty of it beforehand, that you get people message out to you all the time on LinkedIn. Like, it's amazing the amount of providers out there in certain areas that you never thought you needed sort of provision for. But I think as like, to an extent, as boredom set in, as people were in the 3rd month, 4th month of lockdown of being in home, they were more open to conversations. Someone reaching out to you, it's like, I'll take the time to read that, actually. I've not got my commute, or, you're not going to an event, you're not going out, you're not even going out for dinner, are you? Or like going to a friend's, probably sat there Friday night, messages come in, you think, I'll take time now to read it. And so I think, like, in a weird way, people were more receptive. And I've probably found that, like, not just kind of myself and my team are there trying to sell to them, but they've probably found opportunities they didn't or wouldn't have necessarily had exposure to as well.
Exactly. I mean, in a sense, like 2020 was almost a little bit like a playground in a lot of senses, just for experimentation, right? I mean, from our side as well, as a pure event company, we had to, we just had to experiment and kind of find our way as well. And the digital events was like the first step in that. This very podcast that we're here now was another one of these like playground experiments that turned out to work eventually, that I just really enjoy doing as well. And another aspect as well. I mean, going back to the digital events specifically, I think the consensus in general is that the digital events haven't lived up to the expectations that perhaps were there in the beginning of COVID. But can you talk a little bit about, from GIG's point of view, because you guys obviously participated in many of these, can you talk a little bit about, like, what are, from your point of view as a sponsor, what have been the events that have worked and which haven't, and for what reason?
Yeah, I mean, you've always got to sort of highlight when spending sort of in any part of marketing what you're looking to get out of the spend. And I know that sounds an obvious thing to say, and you might argue it's to drive leads, but there's a lot more to it, right? And I think what started in the digital events was reasonably novel. It was quite exciting. It was the first step to some kind of social interaction with the industry, and the first people through the door, I think, did it as best they could, kind of given the scenario. And it was for them at first as it was for others. As you say, kind of, we took an opportunity to put a bit of sponsorship into it, basically a bit of branding, really with the aim of keeping that level of brand awareness that we're not having from not being at an event or not sponsoring or not having a stand. And again, like, the first few, I think, seemed quite good because they were the first few, and it was a novel experience, and it was sort of all of us stepping into this unknown together, kind of messaging on the kind of online platform. I think what then happened as we went 5, 6, 7, 30, 40 digital events down the line, is that it's more and more becoming a slight copy and paste.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of, at least from a spend point of view, getting a bit harder to sort of understand or find the value in it. Like, I think one thing that this sort of forced new digital age of media, or at least, for this period where we've had no physical events, has done is really increased the onus on quality versus quantity. And that's a big one now, I think, for me. And because with digital, you're able to do that, right? It's not like a physical event where anyone can attend. And to actually filter through those people, you've got to speak to them. So anyone that you're speaking to may or may not be a potential buyer or have any interest whatsoever in what you do. But you don't know till you
I just
speak
want
to
your
them.
goodie bag.
Goodie bag socks.
They just want the gig socks. Yeah. Like
Exactly.
me, I came to G3 in Vegas to the GIG booth with no intention other than getting those beautiful America socks, and I still wear them today. So thank you for that.
Had me fooled. I thought you were gonna buy a platform, but again, the good thing with digital is that you're able to better qualify that. Like we're talking about LinkedIn, right? If you put the shoe on the other foot to, as said, a physical event where anyone can attend and you have to speak to them to find out if they actually are interested in what you do or what you sell. Like when we're reaching out on LinkedIn, you don't just type John in and hope that somewhere along the lines of every John you reach out to, one of them be interested. You filter it, as said, geography, job type, vertical they're in. And I think having done the first couple of digital events, more and more they sort of felt like they were kind of, again, pushing on the number piece. And I think needed to get to a point of actually, delivering slightly better qualified or quality to the right people.
Yeah. And maybe also something to think about in this case is, because you were saying that it's kind of a rinse and repeat because there are so many digital events happening. And I think part of that is because some of the conference organizers are not in a financially good situation right now, so they try to do as many as they can to pull in as much sponsorship as possible.
I think
that's
it's also
clear. Yeah,
that's always going to play a factor because it's a really, really horrible time for anyone sort of that has a business built around events. But it's also too easy for everybody to attend one, and I think that's where it doesn't seem to be so specific to what it's saying it's specific to. A normal physical event that is going to appeal to, let's say, a Latin American audience, so it's like a LATAM event. If it was physical, that'd be held somewhere in one of the kind of countries within that market space. And therefore to go there, which has an expense attached, to an extent will filter kind of that the people there are genuinely interested in that sort of specific market. Whereas obviously on the digital event, anyone can attend. And I think what you see now is even where the content's sort of more targeted to the vertical or to the market, people aren't. The attendees are a rinse and repeat.
Yeah. And that leads to kind of the bigger question here, which is it's quite obvious that those events aren't very engaging, right? So you have the same demographic, and that demographic is usually there for the same reason as you, right? They want to find leads. So it's like a task. They are there because they have to, kind of thing. And that is, I think, the major issue here is the fact that if the events are not truly engaging, then how can you make them engaging for potential customers? Because the potential customers will be there because they genuinely want to be there, right? It's not because they have to be there. That's the question to solve. And that's something we talked about yesterday. And I think for us analyzing this in general, I think something that is becoming evident to us in general is that from the operator side of the business, many people who would many of the employees who would be your potential customers aren't necessarily that engaged in what's happening within the industry. They are more engaged what's happening within their own organization, and they are getting briefed by their country managers or whatnot on what's happening in certain markets, but they don't seem to find themselves to these digital events. If that is because they don't offer that much value, or if that is because the target group is just not that passionate about the iGaming industry. Maybe I'll let you answer that. What do you think? Because this is something I've been thinking about a lot in general.
I don't think it's necessarily that people aren't passionate about it. I just think a digital event's got to understand sort of what its like value is, and it's hard. I think it's hard for a digital event to put itself forward as something that is going to be kind of purely a lead generation exercise as the physical events were. Again, it goes back to like how you attend an event even. Some of the people that we would potentially want to speak to, like say the operators, it's very easy with a digital event to obviously go, right, here's an agenda for the day of the 20 talks going on. I only want to turn up to one. And all I need to do is basically go in, log in, listen for half an hour, an hour, whatever it is, log off, out. So you're never, like, we would never see them as an active kind of, I guess, seller within that. Whereas obviously at a physical event, they're walking through, they're walking out, they've got a badge, you meet them. So like, I think something for the, I guess, organizers to consider is kind of maintaining their interest at staying on at the event, which gives increase in opportunity for others that are there to sort of speak to them about kind of doing business. Like right now, and that's the hard piece, is at the minute, like it very much, I think the digital event is to offer some interesting content, listen to a speaker specifically for a vertical, a geography, or whatever it may be, and then sort of close and leave. Whereas, when sort of, I guess, thinking about it from your side, like how are you able to then kind of generate sponsorship or kind of value to customer? You've got to sort of think a lot more about how you can keep people there to engage with each other. And I think that's the kind of bit that's not really been solved yet, is interaction between audience at an event.
Exactly, but I tell you what, audience, and you should absolutely check this out. We are doing the weekly sessions on Clubhouse, which is a new social media phenomenon that came to life. The app has existed for a year, but it became viral when Elon Musk went on Clubhouse like a month and a half ago. Like with anything else, Elon Musk is like the ultimate influencer. Whatever he touches turns into gold, and Clubhouse being one of those things. So Clubhouse is an audio-first platform. And basically a high-level professionals meet to discuss whatever topic they are interested in, right? And so me and Carolina Pelk, who is another industry veteran, we love this platform, and we just said, why don't we start an iGaming room and see what happens? So we started this room like 5 weeks ago for the first time, and we were we were really nervous before. We were like, maybe no one is gonna come, but it's okay. Maybe if 2 or 3 people show up, that's okay as well. But we ended up being like 80 people in that room, and really high level people. Like Jeffrey Haas was there last Thursday. He's the CTO, I think, of DraftKings. Daniel, CEO of Carousel Group, Tin Heat, CEO of Coin Gaming. Really, really high-level people has joined us every single week, and we all talk about how for the first time since the pandemic happened, there is a platform for the industry to genuinely engage with each other, not in this like forced way, but in like a genuine platform for the industry to meet and actually connect and show themselves.
And that's exactly what's needed. I think tomorrow your topic's to can the iGaming industry find its purpose? So pick up on what we were speaking about yesterday, right?
It was definitely based on that, yes. So you should join, James. Honestly, if you have time, honestly, it's such a great platform. If you need an invite, I'll send it to you.
Please. But again, I think that sort of highlights the point that I've kind of been making is in the first, obviously, few iterations, we all joined the digital events because we hadn't spoken to each other, and obviously there was interest in seeing how they went. And kudos to the first few. I thought like the content was really good. There was a high level of speaker. A lot of people attended, but then I think between then and now it's not really changed much. And as said, the bit that's missing is engagement between the audience, because it's one thing to go in and out to listen to someone, right? But then to actually get all those that are listening to them to speak to one another, is a very different kind of proposition. And in fairness, I'm seeing, without naming names, some with future events that are kind of doing far more to try and pre-plan and kind of set up meetings between sort of buyers and sellers that have some level of mutual interest. And I think if people can get that right, that's really interesting, because again, it part solves one of the problems with the physical events, which is that kind of quality versus quantity part, that actually, I'd rather sit down and have 10, 15 meetings in a day or over a couple of days than I would sort of speak to 200 people to find that probably 2 of them have any interest in what we do, and sort of, we see a further conversation. Like, I think at least the kind of B2B side, which is obviously where we sit as supplier, it's far about driving kind of quality and using sort of everyone's time in the best manner. It's not a numbers game.
Yeah, exactly. Like the quantity versus quality, obviously super relevant here, and it's obviously I know that ICE are pushing hard for this now with their new platform and acquisition of Quartz, which is this kind of like one-to-one meeting setup strategy where they become the matchmaker. ICE becomes the matchmaker basically, and they do the gritty work basically by getting the right people in front of buyers and sellers in front of each other. And I think once that became apparent that type of event can be done digitally, I think immediately you understand that, okay, that's where kind of the power can come from the digital event side.
There's immediate value in that. Like, you can't argue that from a buyer's point of view that you wouldn't pay to have someone basically set up meetings for a set number that you've kind of bought into financially, that are actively looking to want to speak to you as well. Yeah. Like, why? Like, who would not pay to have that kind of basic filter system and pre-planned meeting? And I think absolutely that's where I think that kind of value proposition is starting to be realized more. And what I hope, like we said, we'd also talk about, I guess, events towards the end of this year, hopefully if they happen, physical, and then next year. But I hope that mentality is taken into, or more of that is taken into the physical piece next year. Because again, like, if there can be some kind of filtration or kind of channel to drive valuable kind of conversations or opportunities at the physical event and actually cut out time wasted, then that becomes a powerful proposition. Because the other side of it is, like, we don't want to entirely spend the rest of our life just meeting and speaking digitally. Like, we do want to get together. We said yesterday, we're a global industry, but we're quite a close one. There's a lot of connections, a lot of friends throughout it. And I think when allowed and when done in a sort of a comfortable, I guess, and safe manner, we'll all be at the first event that we can be.
Exactly. Yeah, and like you're saying, maybe that is the learning here, that if organizers are able to actively help with the lead generation for their partners. So imagine you come to ICE, and a big part of a successful ICE is to pre-book your meetings. We all know this. You shouldn't book your meetings at the conference. You should book the meetings before the conference. And what if the organizer could help you to cement your agenda by introducing you to potential customers that you want to talk to? I mean, then we're talking about the value proposition goes up by orders of magnitude, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's, that's where the spend can continue. That's where people will keep coming back to sponsor, to have a stand, because again, like, it comes in sort of full swing that then if you have 20 or whatever the number is, quality meetings, kind of pre-booked, pre-planned, partly through the help of organizers, you're going to want to have a nice stand to then have people there to do that, like, and then the spend comes back into that physical event space.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I hope that kind of learning could be taken and then sort of merged with the physical world when it opens up.
Exactly.
So kind of a really long-winded way to answer, I think, your original question. In terms of approach this year, obviously, with an unknown, I've kind of taken, I suppose, a mixed, cautious with slightly optimistic approach.
Okay. What does that mean?
I think we always knew the first 6 months were going to be digital. Like, there's, there were indicators that there might be events able to happen at the back half of the first half of this year, and I think that's all been kind of squashed now. It just, looking at the scale of the pandemic still through most countries that were looking at events, and it's just not going to happen. So kind of preempting that slightly, we had planned most of our exposure, whether it be through some specific ad placement, because again, kind of keeping brand awareness, thought leadership pieces, I touched on yesterday. I think a big part of the industry moving kind of forwards and into sort of better light is for us all to be a little bit kind of more transparent about who works for us, and sort of actually how kind of brilliant they all are individually, more transparent about the products we offer, and again, showing the likes of regulators how much of the product planning is around protection and things like this. So there's those pieces we've planned, but again, sort of in a digital format, like us speaking, although I'm not sure how much content people get from me speaking, but the other sort of good people at Gig that work hard, far more content from them.
Come on, James. Who wouldn't want to listen to you? I mean, I can sit here all day.
Yeah, good to sort of help people go to sleep.
Exactly. Golden voice.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. So yeah, kind of a mix of that, as said, like sort of targeted just sort of branding, banner placement, some thought leadership pieces. As said, great to kind of get across. So we've got more of these talks, and then internally, as we have been last year, doing a lot of outreach, and then looking to the second half of the year, I say kind of cautiously optimistic, in a sense that if there's a possibility to go to physical events and have something there, then we'll be able to do that. We've planned for that eventuality. And if we can't, then we've also sort of we've got still kind of a foundation of marketing that's in place regardless across the digital piece.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something we touched also on I think in the previous podcast, so it could have been in between that as well. But the fact that you went through 2020, and obviously you managed to set a good amount of deals. I think it was like 14 deals on the platform side or something like that you managed, or something along those lines. And so obviously your digital strategy worked, and you were able to set those partnerships. So something that you touched on as well is that when you then go to your CFO in 2021 or 2022 and you ask for €500,000 or whatever the budget may be for in-person events, your CFO would potentially question you and say, well, you hit your targets without these events, like why do you need this €500,000 euro, whatever it is? How do you feel about that now when you're stepping into 2021 and you have set your budgets and you have done your strategy?
Yeah, I understand the kind of thinking behind that kind of viewpoint, but as I'm sure any CFO would also appreciate that everybody was playing in a digital sense in the last year. So there was no alternative for buyers, for example, right? Whereas when hopefully again when things open up later this year, certainly for next year, those physical events will happen again. And therefore to sort of be on a level playing field with our competition, who will be at those, will also need to be. I think what's been important over the last kind of 12, 14 months has been to sort of highlight perhaps areas that are not always needed to sort of have so much kind of exposure, I guess, from a physical event point of view, but it's also highlighted areas that we've missed. I think everyone would like to kind of also get together with the people that we were lucky enough to partner with last year. I think given the opportunity, the partners that we did meet and find through digital means or pure digital means last year, they or future partners will also now go back to physical events to some extent in the next year, and therefore it's quite a balanced argument that we will also need to match that.
Yeah. So go ahead.
No, I just think perhaps in some areas companies put a lot into the physical side, spent being absolutely everywhere, and the exposure at some of those was like humongous. And I think perhaps the one thing CFOs or those in charge of the P&Ls would think is like we can afford to streamline that a little bit. Again, thanks to the sort of kind of digital piece that's been forced on us through the pandemic, that whole quality versus quantity has sort of risen to the top. And I think again, it's like, where are you finding quality as sellers? Like from our size platform, like we know perhaps some of the markets, some of the areas that we will do better in than others. And so previous to that, perhaps it was a slight unknown, in which case you did tend to go to absolutely every event or have some exposure at every event. Whereas now it's sort of, we kind of are quite honed in on the market or markets that we want to go for and the kind of buyer type that we need to speak to, and could be a little bit more specific about how we go about that.
Exactly. I think something that's quite interesting is it was in the conference organizers' interest to keep the status quo. The fact that ICE is massive, and obviously Clarion is able to charge a lot of money to exhibit. It's in their interest not to shake that up, that fact. Same with Sigma, same with SPC, and so on and so forth. But so now through this year that we have had to go through digital, and we and others had to innovate, and we had to find other ways to connect customers and consumers. It has also enabled value creation in other areas only than the conferences, right? So if you are, let's say that you are a small supplier, if you were a small supplier in 2019, your way to connect with customers is to exhibit, right? But now there is other ways as well to kind of get your name out there and so on and so forth through the innovation as well, right? So that's also a question then, like will, let's say, ICE 2022, will it be the same interest and will it be the same grand show, or will it slightly decrease, or will it, it's hard to say exactly how that will turn out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's an impossible one to predict. I think it will remain as the largest show through the industry. I think the interest has always been incredibly high from a kind of buyer side in terms of buying stands or sponsorship, and I don't think that would drop. I mean, from my time there were huge amounts of interest. So I think people will continue. I mean, it's also going to be, again, depending on what happens later this year, one of the sort of first major events for a long time.
Exactly.
If anything, there'd be a slight shift in audience, right? You know, the last event had 30,000+ people. You know, will there be the same level? Maybe not. Maybe less are comfortable in traveling now and being out in places like that. You know, we talked about companies, you know, not stopping their sort of sponsorship or exhibiting at these events, but perhaps streamlining a bit. So in the past, where you've sent or seen people send what seems to be an entire company, you know, take over half a hall sort of thing, like perhaps there would be less of that, which in turn will, I guess, allow space for new companies to come in and exhibit. But you know, with a value proposition like we mentioned earlier, where people are able to be supported by the organizers in helping to set up meetings, like, still, why wouldn't you go, right? Even if it was half of the audience, but that was a quality 15,000 versus 30-something thousand, and you know, a bunch of them are basically just wanting socks or a free coffee. Like, we're gonna still go. There's still huge value in that. Like, we certainly haven't met all 30,000 people at the last like.
Exactly. It goes back to the quality versus quantity. Because I think there's a lot of forces in play here. I mean, ESG is actually one of these forces too that will further solidify this quality versus quantity argument. Because I spoke to, for example, the VP of marketing of Playtech. Trevor is a good friend of mine, and he was saying that because of ESG and the pressure that Playtech as a listed company has on them, you know, they are not able to, for example, buy as many new computers as they want. You know, so many of the workforce is like on old computers and old technology. Why? Because of ESG. Because the environmental part of ESG doesn't allow organizations to have too much turnaround with electronics. You know, you buy a computer and you use it until you're not able to use it anymore. And similarly with travel too, it's the same thing. You know, from ESG point of view, how much do you allow your staff to fly, and for what reason? That's also something that listed companies that are thinking about ESG will want to limit. You know, and as we go into the future, that will only become a stronger and stronger argument to decrease kind of the footprint that certain organizations have at conferences as well. But like you're saying, why does it matter if it's 15K or 30K? Because the 15K will be much more relevant than the 15K who doesn't go.
Exactly. And I think that's what the last year's done, right? Is it's allowed you to really assess, you know, when you need to travel, when you need to be an event, like when you need to travel between offices. You know, how many of those conversations, even now in an open world in the coming months or year, will just happen over Slack as opposed to flying over to see someone. Exactly. Like, it won't stop happening. It's just, it will be slightly less, and when it does, it'll be of higher quality.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, man, the world where you have to go to Singapore to give a 2-hour PowerPoint presentation and then fly back is over. That's not going to happen again, even when we go back to normal. You know, it used to be that before COVID, like to have a Zoom meeting was kind of like, if you weren't like prioritized, then you would do a Zoom meeting. You know what I mean? But that kind of stigma, or whatever you want to call it, is obviously washed away now. I mean, and that obviously will mean that. I mean, for us, I mean, I don't know. People complain a lot about Zoom meetings, but I really love this period because I can meet so many more people than I used to be able to do. Take the car somewhere, drive. I mean, it's an hour just in like unnecessary, unspent time just to go and meet someone for an hour and then drive back. It's like, no, much rather do a Zoom meeting and be able to meet 10 people in a day rather than 3 people in a day. You know, and for you guys' point of view, that must have also been had a quite big effect. I mean, being able to meet clients outside of the conferences as well in a much more organic way, so to say, that Zoom has become, rather than having to travel and meet potential clients or casinos or wherever you want to meet to set these deals.
Yeah,
have you noticed that impact?
Certainly, but I think it would be nice to, especially having done these deals, to then go and meet the new partners. As said, sort of, you know, one, we're very proud and excited with all the partnerships that we have, and through the process we get to know and like these new partners. And obviously it would be lovely to sort of actually sit down in person, have a meal, have a conversation, have a drink together. I think that side is missed. But again, it's going down to the kind of filtering of the unnecessary travel. Instead of maybe going out to meet hundreds of potential partners, or actually the flight and the physical part is done, once they become a partner. And, it's just new ways of looking at it, isn't it?
Exactly. So jumping from one thing to the other here, James. I mean, we talk a lot about conferences now, specifically in-person side of the industry. Now, the last year, obviously, you've been focusing on the digital side as well, and I've seen that you do a lot of thought leadership with IGB. I've seen that you've done with EGR as well, and others as well. What do you feel is like the state of industry media in general right now? Do you feel that it's on the right track? Is there anything that can be done better? And how has your experience been throughout this year?
I mean, I guess to an extent we've answered a bit of it in previous, in earlier in this conversation. How I think the media's doing, I think they're doing a good job, like a very good job. I think it's been one of the hardest hit parts of this industry, right? A lot of the media companies had huge event exposure, physical event exposure, and I think they've been, as said, through pretty tough times. So, as much as we see.
Sorry to interrupt you again, but take the events and digital events out of the equation. Like now, it's specifically the media side and the news portals themselves, as organizations, and how they kind of expose the industry and in general, on that side of the industry. It would be interesting to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think doing a reasonably good job on the media side of the industry, and how they expose us. Like you said, that we do a kind of reasonable amount of thought leadership with different media companies, and again, we're happy with the partners that we're working with on that side, and feel that we're getting value from what we're doing. We're getting the opportunity to speak about kind of what we do. So yeah, I think,
because for example, my argument would be the state of industry media. I have a quite strong opinion that I think it's way too nice. I think it's too much handholding, and I think it's I think they play too much into their partners and sponsors rather than genuinely want to dig deep into what is happening in the industry, good or bad, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think at times we've all been on the receiving end of good and bad press as businesses, and I don't think it's always a case of them just sort of portraying partners in a nice light. I think we were speaking about yesterday, right? Like how we help the industry get seen by outsiders in a better light, and the media within our industry has a lot sort of to do and support that. So I think, yes, you're right. It's good to have real conversations and sort of have editorial that is solely driven by an editorial team and not by sort of who's paying to sponsor things or who's paying for adverts. But at the same time, we shouldn't be going too harshly at each other and being overly critical for the sake of being overly critical, when again we should sort of be working a little bit in coherence with each other to sort of better that kind of exposure, because that's the first place, right? When people are looking into the industry that aren't in the industry, the first place they often go is to the media. So they will look at the kind of digital magazines or digital sites that represent our industry, and if all they're seeing is negative stories, it's not really going to entice them into wanting to look much further. So there's a balance to be had.
Yeah, there's a balance for sure, and I do think that the balance is really skewed at the moment, because I do think that I don't see much critical journalism being done whatsoever in the industry.
No, I mean, I find it hard when I see I don't know, you know, you see certain like companies perhaps being put in a good light that, you know, haven't necessarily done good things, or, you know, there's like negativity surrounding it. And at times then you can see like, oh, but they're also spending a heck of a lot of money on whatever it is, you know. And in that sense, yeah, I do agree. I think, again, sort of touching on some of the bits yesterday that we spoke about, but the media could please a little better in that regard, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a way for the iGaming industry. I mean, if we really want to fully mature as an industry, we shouldn't shy away from the dark side of the industry either. And I think the more the kind of the shady side of the industry, if you want to, if you will, is exposed, the more we can have real and honest conversations of how to solve certain problems.
That's why we all need to be far more transparent and accountable for who we're working with. And this is what I said yesterday, like at every touch point, we should be transparent about who we're working with, and kind of accountable for our decision to work with that partner, whichever part you're on. If you're on the media and you're allowing companies to have a stand at your show, or spend on ads online, banner ads, or spend to sit on a panel and speak, then, you know, you've made that, you should be accountable for that person as well. Like if you're promoting that brand, then you are part accountable for it. And again, that's why I think through all parts of industry, we need to be more transparent, and be kind of like more proud of who we're working with. And if you're not, you got to start asking some questions, right?
Yeah, and I think those questions are important, honestly, because you know, we both know. I mean, that I feel quite clearly that within the industry there are two forces at play. There are organizations like yourself, the GIG, who is doing everything they can to legitimize the industry and to bring the industry, to transcend the industry, and to bringing outsiders into our ecosystem. And that's what you're doing, obviously, working with certain media partners and trying to you know, bring new partners into the industry. And then there is this other side as well in the industry, which is which couldn't care less about the players that are only operating to by any means, by you know, building their databases, and there's no player protections, there's no regulation, and so on and so forth. But I mean, looking at iGaming Media, which is the portal to understanding the industry and the context and the forces at play and the current you know, status of what's happening in the industry. I mean, I just never see anything being reported on that side of the industry, and I do think it's a shame. And I think that there is room for a new player to come on board who
more investigative journalism,
but also who dare take the step of, like, it's like, sure, you are supported by sponsors, you are supported by sponsors who are advertising on your site and so on and so forth, but who can dare to say that, you know what, if there's something that is worth reporting on that is a bit critical, we will do it anyway. And if we risk losing the sponsor, so be it. Even as long as you keep integrity in the journalism. So you shouldn't lie, you shouldn't exaggerate, you shouldn't do anything that's unfair. You should always ask for an opinion, but do the investigative journalism. You know what I mean? I think the industry will be much better for it.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that.
Good, we agree, Dave. So I like it. No, and I think, you know, a step in the right direction has been the last year since COVID, because I think if there's a silver lining to the on the conference side and on the content side, it is the fact that these digital events, even if they haven't been like massively engaging, what they have contributed with is almost like an intellectual renaissance. I've said that before, where, you know, you don't have to pay €1,000 to go to Icebox. and listen to content and understand kind of where the trends are heading and so forth. Now it's readily available on the internet on a weekly basis. There is content, and that has enabled, and even like our Clubhouse sessions, it has brought forward a lot of people in the industry who otherwise wouldn't have a platform, and it has brought those like very passionate people to light, and people like us as an organizer, we hear certain individuals just participating in their first panel or whatever, and they have really interesting things to say, which means that we can then bring them and their points and viewpoints to light, and we can bring the dialogue further, just like you and me.
Perhaps that helps. That answers a point you brought up yesterday about some people not caring beyond the sort of remit of their company. Like, how do you get more people to care about the industry as a whole and as a kind of wider thought for them, as opposed to just directly who they work for? And yeah, perhaps this is how you answer it, because you are bringing down the barriers to people to engage in content, like from kind of receiving point of view, but also being able to put their view across. Like, prior to this, you mentioned some kind of talk panels or channels there that, you have to pay a huge amount of money to basically be exposed to good content. And like, that is shielding knowledge from people that, we should be empowering with knowledge. And with that, perhaps you empower more people with the tools and the knowledge through the industry, and they will care more about it, as opposed to just being limited what they can find out within their company. Because all these portals, it's about to start naming them, but I won't, but so many portals charge like reasonably kind of high amounts for data, for information. And unless you're paying for that, or your company is paying for it, you don't get that exposure, and you don't get to see it, right? And I think that's why, the stuff you guys are doing, and like the breakfast meeting and stuff, is so important, because it allows anybody to get some like really top quality exposure from the industry. Say, like, a lot of people that are very, high level, C-level, etc. You named a few names earlier. Normally someone would probably have to pay thousands of euros to listen to them speak, and perhaps not be as open that they might be in a kind of free-flowing conversation on a Thursday morning. And that's exactly what's needed. Like, we're like, speaking technically, we're in an open source world now. Like, we should share more.
I completely agree. I mean, and it leads back to your point as well with transparency. The more transparent the industry is, the more this dialogue, the more discussions, and so on and so forth, the more transparent the industry becomes. And I think if there's anything as well, there becomes almost like, when there's so many discussions happening, it becomes almost like there becomes some consensus within the industry. They become like, some points become obvious, like player protection, for example. It's like, it's obvious that is something we should do as an industry.
Like, when would that ever get argued against? When would anyone stand up and be like, no, we shouldn't protect players? Like,
exactly. And through those dialogue, it's become more evident why as well, right? So you have a lot of people perhaps before who get this argument, we should focus on player protection. Why should we do that? It's not so important or whatever. But through these dialogues, it becomes so evident why that is the case. And that type of consensus also drives the industry to a better place as well, because you realize that, in the end of the day, as on an individual basis, from our ethics and morals, and also from a financial point of view, we want the industry obviously to become legitimized. That is both a business case and also from a moral and ethical point of view. It makes sense in all areas.
It does, and that stems through kind of the entire ecosystem of the industry. Like, not player protections, the one piece, but then the kind of ethics from the operators, suppliers, kind of even regulators. Like, there's obviously that case, more UK focused, with it's the football index, the kind of buying and selling shares in footballers, basically. But that, because I think they're licensed through the UKGC, that's now become a big issue in the papers and the news here for gambling. Like, because it wasn't financial, wasn't regulated by financial bodies, regulated by gambling bodies. But that one bad egg in that operation index has now meant there are stories running through BBC, through all news portals about problem gamblers. Like problem gamblers with no relation to football index specifically, but just like that just gives kind of a platform again for media to sort of fill up space with knocking us, and it doesn't help kind of the case in point where, on the flip side, like you brought it up yesterday, you got Kindred like openly going out and saying, we see this small margin coming from problem gamblers and we're going to eliminate that, and we're being open and honest about it. And then we get a bad apple that suddenly sort of knocks all this good work that others are doing. Like, we take these step forward to have two back. So that's why we need to get better again throughout the whole. A lot of action going on your end. That's where we need to get better through the whole industry. As I said, if there was that greater level of transparency and more exposure and accountability at every touch point and every part of the ecosystem, it's less likely to happen.
Exactly. No, I agree with that as well in general, and it's just so interesting, and it ties in a little bit as well, just of transcending the industry and where is it heading, and where are we going as an industry. And I mean, just from one thing to the other, it'd be interesting to know as well. Jumping over to GIG specifically a bit, like what is your long-term vision in general? Like, how do you guys see your organization progressing, and in the type of deals you are setting, and the type of organizations you are setting, and so on?
I think continuing to what we're built on, through last year, having shift focus to being a pure B2B player, from obviously selling the B2C business, also moving away from white label. That our plan, as said, is picking up from where we left off, of finding regulated partners, or partners in regulated or soon to be regulated markets that we see long-term symbiotic kind of returns and value in. And that partner type, as we discussed yesterday, is land-based going online, looking at sort of media companies that are coming into the space, as well as pure digital players that have or share long-term ambition, that are going for regulated licenses, as you've seen recent partnerships this year. So it's very much about kind of sustainability with our partnerships, and like it's for us, it's always a very two-way process, kind of partner selection and us being selected by a partner. And there's a lot of work should and has to be done on both sides. Like we want to sort of know the partners in it for the long term, and they obviously want to know that we offer the right sort of services and technology to kind of match up with their expectation. And then together we have a really kind of awesome future ahead of us.
Awesome to hear. James, shall we end this podcast today on a bit of a visionary question as well? We end it like we started it, basically.
What, with a knock joke?
Not the knock joke. No, we're not gonna have that much fun, but
too much fun.
Too much fun. Why don't we try to make some predictions that we can go back and laugh ourselves how wrong we were? The state of the industry in 5 years' time. If you look at, we talk a lot about sustainability, and if the industry succeeds with that, we seem to be on a good trend. What do you think the state of the industry will be in 5 years' time? Can you make some thoughts or predictions?
There's 1,000 pieces to go into. I think, like, we touch on it, and it's going that direction already. But sort of global regulation not regulation on a global level as in a single regulation to kind of manage all, but I think more countries, sort of the velocity of countries regulating is just going to keep going up and up over the coming years. We're going to see a largely regulated US. We're going to see a regulated Canada, obviously Germany, the Netherlands, New Zealand, many markets to follow suit. In which I think with that happening, I hope gambling will sort of be put, and you guys can discuss this on the podcast with the topic you've got tomorrow morning, but we will get into sort of a better echelon in wider perception from outsiders. So that will help. I hope to see a lot more companies like Kindred did make that kind of pledge as well. I think it's pretty cool to make a pledge to sort of bet yourself in that sense, as we kind of, in different walks of life see kind of governments do on being carbon neutral by certain dates, like understanding there's a bigger picture that we sort of need to aim for. And I think we are. We see ourselves hopefully positioned in, I think, a lot of innovation in the entertainment side of slots, like continued innovation there, because as you say, like, there's easier arguments on the entertainment value when it comes to like poker or sort of sports betting through then being at the event themselves. And I think slots is sort of moving in that direction now as well. It has been for a while. We touched on Twitch and a few other sort of increase in entertainment value through them. So I see awesome. That just kind of speeding up a lot.
Let's go back.
What do you think?
Okay, the big question for me as well. Yeah, that's a good question. I think the state of the industry is heading in the right direction, and regulation will speed up the process of the industry having to clean itself up in some ways. And I mean, I'm a massive I'm a massive fan of like this being a visionary in general. So something that I'm really interested in at the moment is ESG, and I've talked about it on the podcast before. And the fact that so many organizations are pledging to focus on ESG in general. And I think that even companies like Shell, one of the biggest oil and gas companies in the world, have pledged to become carbon neutral by 2050. An oil and gas company, right? And if that is where, if we look at like the weakest link in the ESG chain, and you look at a company like Shell that you could argue being, the worst environmental company in the world, and if they are pledging to become carbon neutral, I think that just tells the story of where the world is heading in general. Yeah. And I think that Kindred is a good example of the iGaming version of Shell, let's say, where harmful gambling has been such a big part of the industry for so long, and and also a big part of the revenue for a lot of operators have been in the VIP segment, and it seems that is now being phased out. And if you want to keep your shareholders happy, you have to have a strong ESG focus. And I think if you don't have that, then you will see Kindred emerging as the winners, and you will see the ones who don't follow suit as the losers. So I think, I'm not going to say exactly how the industry will look like in 5 years, but I think that it will be heavily influenced by ESG specifically.
I agree on that. So I think also something like, which so obvious we didn't mention it, but we're going to see some big, I think, advancements in technology, right? There's going to be a piece or pieces of software come out that will be game changers. And I think, we're seeing elements of it now with certain kind of AI tools, certain automation tools. And I think something or things big will come, and in turn, perhaps, even go beyond the borders of our industry. I would really like to see something like that in the next 5 or 6 years, as opposed to, sort of us, being a secondary adopter to something that we do, because like, not just we as gig or someone else, within the sphere of our industry, produce a piece of technology that's just so awesome it becomes, massively mainstream, and it would only work to help the industry, knowing that that's where it came from. So like when you look at all the incredible like innovators that we have in the industry, there's got to be kind of, I think, things to come from that.
Exactly. So we talk about like paradigm shifting technologies here, and that's a discussion point in its own right.
Yeah.
I like the argument I would make on that is like in the recent years, or pretty much since the inception of the iGaming industry, I think the paradigm shifting, or I wouldn't call it paradigm shifting, but like the most disruptive technologies have not been able to transcend the iGaming industry. And what I mean by that is like it hasn't been able to pull in an audience which is like hadn't considered being part of this industry before in a natural way. I mean, you'll see like, what would be like transformative innovation in the iGaming industry. There would be like, like a big time gaming coming up with megaways, that we see as like a big innovation. But in reality, that is just making the slot machines a bit better. But what if? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think comes, as I said, from something even being like with predictability, where we're having to work harder and harder because obviously we want to, in a sense, we mentioned or keep touching on the player protection piece, but the more that you can, I guess, automate that and predict, for example, like problem gamblers by technologies like AI that's understanding kind of patterns, like that sort of technology, like the ingestion of the real-time data, how it's kind of analyzed and again in a real-time actioned upon, like that's transferable if packaged in the right way, if repurposed for other industry, not just from a point of view of player protection, but the sort of, I guess, the mechanics behind it. Like given some time, that can be taken and moved beyond, and perhaps
exactly,
like we're kind of running a lot faster in our industry because we need to match up with the ever evolving kind of regulators or regulatory restraints in which we're kind of constantly having put around us.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then we are so focused on protecting our players and coming up with AI and machine learning systems to accomplish that. But exactly what you were saying, what if that technology can help other industries as well? And that's not something that the industry is thinking about right now, obviously, but God knows what can come out of that technology.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think, with that in mind, with what everyone is having to do, like it would be a matter of time before someone's able to sort of actually take something like that and, as said, kind of run forwards with it. Like there is some amazing innovation happening. Like, I see it, all the time at Gig and in the product that we have, and it's things like kind of predictability around players to in turn sort of help on the player protection piece, and being able to better predict problem gamblers, like within the first few interactions they ever have on a website, on a operation, going, well, these patterns would highlight that they are a potential problem gambler. They've not even placed a bet yet, but just again sort of through the learning of movement and interaction, we're able to get to that point far sooner. And you're seeing things like that being developed. You just think, I mean, it's incredible. And wow, what you could do with that kind of sort of functionality repurposed and put in other industry or even within gaming, just in different areas. Like, it's very cool.
Absolutely, and couple that with the fact that people, technology where you're able to push messages to people's cell phones or whatever as they are in a stadium and watching a game, for example, and being enticed to place a bet. I know that I did a podcast with Alan Stone of Intellytics. It's a marketing company as well, and he talked about that. He talked about that in the future of a kind of marketing. You'll be able to reach the customer as he's in the stadium and entice them to potentially place a bet, for example. And if you can couple that with real player protection, you can do that kind of without the concern of potentially marketing yourself to potential harmful players and whatnot. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, and as I said, that's sort of touch on some of the technologies that kind of we're already got here at Gig and available to our partners.
Absolutely. So
that'd be my finishing statement.
Yeah. Good pitch.
Quick, cut it.
70 minutes in, you got your pitch in there. So yeah.
Finally.
So I'm gonna end with the final question here as well, James. I mean, except for having a legendary smile and this perfect hair, like what makes I mean, you are seen as you're seen as one of the best sales people in the industry in general. What makes a good salesperson in 2021?
Crikey. What makes a good salesperson in 2021? I don't know. You have to ask one.
You don't see yourself as I mean, you're the director of sales.
Yeah, I mean, that is officially my job title. I'm a good salesperson is very good at selecting a good company and ensuring that company has very good people supporting the product that they're selling. And for me, a Gig, we have a great product, a great bunch of people around me, great direction from leadership above. And that in turn sort of, I think, has certainly made my life, I guess, on the front line a little bit easier. And that's a big key part of selling, right? Is to know that you're supported in that respect and that you believe in the product that you're selling, taking out to market. In 2020 or 2021 now, I think a lot of it's to sort of mentally stay positive. We've all been locked up for the best part of a year now. So just keeping that level of positivity, getting on as many podcasts with you as possible. A, to stay happy, B, to fill the time a little bit as well. Read a lot of the industry news, as said, and we touch on, like, as much as you can absorb as much kind of content that's out there when available, where available, which is a little kind of nod to the publishers to allow as much of their content to be readily available as possible, because then it certainly helps kind of in arming you with a foundation of conversation with partners. Get good at LinkedIn search. All sorts. I can't give too much away,
Exactly, it's the secret sauce. I can see that you're holding it back a little bit.
Just on here, all these incredible things I just can't say. Oh, I wish.
After 2.5 hours about talking about transparency and here we are. But yeah, anyway.
And that's it. You get right to the end, and now I'm a closed book.
Exactly.
It's only because I have nothing to say. There's no sort of real secret to it.
No, exactly. Be a good person. I guess that's the if you're a good person selling an honest product, that I guess will.
Don't be a dick.
Yeah, don't be a dick.
I remember that. Honestly, I sent that to you a while ago. I actually think I said something harsher, but honestly, that is a baseline to go about business. Just don't be a dick, and you do see it a lot, and you just think that's going to make no one's life better. We're not going to get on now. Just be nice, like smile a bit. I mean, it's not hard. And then if you are frustrated, as we spoke yesterday, and as the top behind is kind of, I suppose, a nod of the cap to, go for a run. Like, go clear your mind, or find find an activity to allow yourself some personal space to sort of, compartmentalize the day and sort of filter through the shit and come up with some solutions and find yourself in a better place after it. I'm going to go for a run after this talk, probably question all the kind of nonsense I've spouted and why I said certain things. Come back even worse than I started. No, I think I'll go on a nice run and clear my head from a day's work.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll do the same as well, James. But I think this is
Thinking to yourself,
great.
I'm never having this guy on again. Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we'll do the next podcast as we are running. That would be something.
You made me move this for sort of heavy breathing. I don't think it would be much better on a podcast.
No, I don't think so either. Anyway, so advice from James King: be a successful salesperson. Don't be a dick, and you'll be right on track. James, 2.5 hours. It went like nothing.
Tell that to your audience.
Yeah, tell that to the audience for the 2.5 people and the dog who is still listening to this. But you know what? Whatever people think, and you know what? I think that I've had a lovely time doing this for 2 hours. And anytime you want, my friend, you'll be back here. So take care of yourself, okay? And yeah, same here. And I can't wait to see you in person as well.
Can't wait to see you. Can't wait to see everyone in person. Yeah, it would be fantastic.
A beer and a whiskey, and then we talk about how wrong we were.
We'll see.
Brilliant, James. Take care of yourself, okay?
You too. Chat soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Ciao.